welcome into whatever episode of the Blogger Bowl this is. It is our Week 6 recap. It is our Week 7 early lines. Dan, I just have one question for you. What time is it?
By my watch, it is 2:20 p.m. and OU really sucks.
They suck.
Really suck.
They suck. You were going to get the floor to start this one anyway because it's recapping Texas Oklahoma. But after that one, after the 49-0, just obliteration, domination, whatever you want to call it, I want to give you the floor here. Just take us through it. How are you feeling about Texas? How was it watching that game? How sweet was it seeing kind of not the foot on the other shoe here, or the shoe on the other foot here? Not that you guys ever lost that bad to Oklahoma, but you know what I mean? Like, just how awesome was Saturday?
It was pretty spectacular. I guess we'll start there. I was going to start somewhere else.
I don't care if it's an unranked matchup.
Texas 49, Oklahoma 0. Here's a list of indignities suffered by the Oklahoma Sooners on Saturday. 49 points, the most ever scored by Texas against Oklahoma, which was a little surprising to me. I thought they could have gotten to 50 at some point. 49 points is the most lopsided loss to Texas ever. Obviously, it is the first time Oklahoma has been shut out in any game since 1998 against Texas A&M, and the first time Oklahoma has been shut out by Texas since 1965. I didn't actually, when I was doing my notes here, I didn't want to spend a ton of time talking about Texas, but since you've asked, and
I would like curious, you to, though.
A couple of things. One, so happy. If you saw the thumbnail on the show before we started, so happy for Bijan Robinson, 130 yards, 2 touchdowns. He finally got to be the man in a big game for Texas. He's deserved it so much, having to just play behind and with some really bad teams over the last couple of years. And if I may do my Steve Buscemi, hello fellow kids meme for a second, Quinn Ewers is him. Like Quinn Ewers, he's got that dog in him. Like Quinn Ewers, Oklahoma's really bad defensively. Like, we get it, and he's going to have some tough days ahead. Saturday, they're going to play a really good defense in Iowa State, but, like, he is not fazed by anything. He stepped up, he made the throws, and if he can get I was the number one recruit in the country, and I'm 19, 20 years old, whatever, I could make any throw when he really can't out of his system. The sky is the limit for this guy because he was so good in that game. So really happy for Texas. And look, I understand realistically that it is far more likely they go 6-6 than they go 10-2. But I've seen a couple of people in the college football media kind of talk about this idea of Texas making a run and what happens if they finish 10-2, which I don't think is going to happen. Realistically, they play the 4 worst teams in the league to start conference play, like Tech, West Virginia, Oklahoma, Iowa State. I think those are probably the 4 least good teams.
Oklahoma's at the bottom of that.
Yeah, and it's weirdly Oklahoma's pretty bad.
It's so strange.
But like, okay, let's say hypothetically they do. My tinfoil hat theory that I put on Twitter yesterday is if Alabama runs the table, they go 13-0 and beat Georgia. I'm assuming Alabama's going to be number 1, even though I still think Ohio State's the best team in the country. And would ESPN, if Texas goes 10-2, and there were any kind of scenario, or I guess 11-2 in this case, and wins the Big 12, is there any kind of scenario where ESPN tries to convince the committee to give us Alabama, Texas the rematch? You know, Texas could have, maybe should have won that game, maybe would have won that game if Quinn Ewers hadn't gotten hurt. It was on Fox. So, you know, now ESPN would have the game when they didn't have the first one. So just kind of a funny thing. And it's nice to feel like the program, if nothing else, is moving in the right direction, and that'll end on Saturday when they lose to Iowa State. No, I'm just kidding. I don't think they're going to lose to Iowa State on Saturday. The game will be on my card. I will let you know now, and there is going to be a little bit of a Texas fade, which is actually really only mild. It's really only mild pessimism.
15.5, right?
I think that number got even higher, but I'm not really sure where it is.
Wait, but I thought Matt Campbell wins in big moments, though.
Well, Matt Campbell beats teams when he's not. He wins games when he's not supposed to. True. It's when he's a 3.5-point favorite or 3.5-point underdog, or in that window where he doesn't. He lost another one, by the way. Matt got absolutely he covered, but Matt got absolutely screwed by that fumble play at the end of the game. But I really wanted to use this game to talk about where Oklahoma is right now, because it was embarrassing. Like, when we talked about them in the preseason and all like off season, I was like, okay, well, they lost a lot and there's a lot of upheaval, and you know, it could be a year of transition for that program. And then as we got closer to the season, I was like, Venables is good. I think Venables is going to be good. He understands the program. He knows what it's going to take to win there. Jeff Levy's a good coordinator. Dylan Gabriel's a good quarterback. They're Oklahoma. They'll figure it out. But like, man, they can't do anything well on defense. They've got run on by Kansas State, by TCU, by Texas, teams who do things entirely differently in the run game. They can't stop anything in the passing game. After the Nebraska game, the last 3 games, the losses, they haven't been able to get to the quarterback. They have done nothing well. And their entire season was contingent upon Dylan Gabriel being able to play well. And then he gets hurt and they were screwed. So in the first quarter of this game, because I know, Matt, you didn't get to see a lot of it, Oklahoma runs a fake field goal early in the game in the first quarter. And one of my buddies, is even more pessimistic about Texas than I am, which I know is hard to believe, but it's true. He's texting us. He's like, I can't believe they weren't ready for that. What's going on? Like, why weren't they ready? And me and my other buddies in the chat were like, dude, they're going to the fake field goal in the first quarter. They know they've got no chance in this game. They were successful with running some wildcat stuff that Texas just wasn't ready for, but they went away from it at weird times, but that doesn't seem like that was going to be sustainable, particularly when their defense couldn't get off the field in that game. It was weird. And then, so it's the third quarter. It's 28-0. Oklahoma's got the ball near-ish midfield, not in Texas territory, but not like at their own 20. So it's the 3rd and 8.
40-ish.
They run a wildcat handoff for 1 yard and then punt down 28-0. It was like in that moment, early in the third quarter, they threw in the towel. They might as well have just let the clock run at that point. Might have just had a running clock the rest of the game. Texas could have named their score. Hudson Card got 1 series because they wanted to let him play in the game, but he's been banged up. So he got 1 series, and they brought in the third stringer. The defense. The funny thing is they did leave the defense in to make sure they got the shutout. But they called the starters early in the fourth quarter in this game on offense. Texas did. To me, that says a lot more about where Oklahoma is than where Texas is. And that's a program where maybe they figure some things out, but there's a lot of soul searching to do. And they don't really maybe have the personnel that they need to be successful right now, but just the effort and the vibes of all of it was really, really bad.
I have this might be an overreaction question, but I want to pose it to you because my brother and I were kind of bullshitting about it on the golf course when we saw the score, but think there might be a little merit to it and might be a little bit, but it's probably a little bit overreaction. But with the conference shift coming, uncertainty at the head coach position, and quite honestly, now Brett Venables is going to start losing some recruits, and he's going to enter next year probably on the hot seat already. Is Oklahoma in danger of becoming Nebraska? Because that recruiting, when it goes to the SEC, I think it's going to take a little bit of a hit because they're entering themselves into brand new recruiting battles that I'm not sure they're going to be equipped to win with Brett Venables. And then if there's another coaching change early on in that tenure, they're already battling for recruits with Texas. That Texas is now, Texas has always been able to recruit, but Oklahoma's gone from a top 5 recruiting class every year to kind of that tide seems to be turning towards Texas. I think they're going to start suffering recruiting, and I think they're in danger of hitting a slippery slope. I don't know. Yeah, I just want to pose that.
So here's a fun fact about the rivalry game. So did you know, geographically speaking, the campus from Oklahoma is slightly closer to the Cotton Bowl than the University of Texas is?
Did not know that.
Yeah, it's a matter of 3 or 4 miles in either direction, which is why it's a true neutral.
How far is it from?
It's three and a half hours. It's Texas is a big state. Obviously you know that, and it's a
big old state. Yeah.
Neither one's right next to it, but and that kind of instructs the opinion because Oklahoma, the difference between Nebraska, you don't realize until you look at a map how remote Nebraska is. Nebraska's a lot further north, a lot more out than you think. Oklahoma they share a border. It's the Red River rivalry. They're close to North Texas, which still produces a lot of players. So I don't think that the recruiting is going to take a hit. You also remember they're probably going to go to a pod system of some kind when they go to the SEC. So Oklahoma's probably going to be grouped with Texas A&M, and Arkansas. So you're going to get geographic rivalry still, even if you're going to lose Bedlam. So I don't think that they're going to struggle with it. And I think when you look at the context of the history of that program, that you can make the argument that maybe Nebraska is the only program that has overachieved more in the history of college football than Oklahoma. And that's probably not even true because Nebraska hasn't been good for 2 decades now. Oklahoma, aside from some early years in the 90s and the John Blake era or whatever, by and large, since the 40s to now has been a really, really good program. And it makes no sense other than the fact that and I'm not being that guy. I'm not being rivalry guy. Ooh, there's jealousy. They don't have the resources. They don't have the population. They have had to dig and fight and claw and work harder than Texas did to be good at football, when Texas is just like, oh, well, we have all these resources, all this land, all these great players from our state who want to come represent Texas. Oklahoma's had to fight for it, and that's been kind of the MO of that program for their entire history. So I think when you're moving into a conference, it's going to be harder to win because you have Alabama and Georgia, and obviously like the high end of LSU and Florida and Tennessee is a lot higher than the high end of Oklahoma State and Baylor and so on and so forth. It's going to make it trickier, but I don't necessarily think that the recruiting is going to take a hit. But I think for both of those programs, like even Texas, even if they're on the uptick, like you're just moving to a tougher conference at the top at least.
Yeah, and I honestly thought Venables would come out and Oklahoma's defense would look a little bit less like Oklahoma this year. But it's like a carbon copy. And even before, and even Levy coming in with Gabriel, I thought like, okay, this will work. And I think people are pointing to the fact that Gabriel got hurt. I mean, he got hurt halfway through the Kansas State game when they were already getting worked. So it's not like he went down and all of a sudden everything went to hell. It's like, even with Dylan Gabriel, is that worth plus 49 in this game? Even with Dylan Gabriel, this game is still a blowout. Like maybe it's 38-14. But it's still not that close. I mean, it was domination on all sides of the football, not just Oklahoma's ineptitude on offense, but just an ineptitude on defense to let, as you mentioned, Texas do whatever they wanted. And just my slight conspiracy theory brain is slightly agreeing with you, Dan, in the fact that they can chalk up Texas's 2 losses to one single player. So it's like, hey, outside of, they
can in their head spin it. They can spin zone.
I have some thoughts on that in a second. But
I don't agree with it, but I could get there if they win out and Ewers is putting up ridiculous numbers. Yeah. And it's like, hey, they're the hottest team. They would have beat Alabama if he didn't go down, in which case, even give him a Texas A&M loss, that's a 1-loss team who's got a hot quarterback with the top running back. Like, they can spin it any way they want. Yeah. And
I'll say I think Texas has the best chance any 2-loss team has ever had. I don't think it's going to happen.
Fair. Yeah, I think that's
fair. I think they have up until this point of any 2-loss team, because there have been some debates whether it's Penn State the year they won the Big Ten. But there have been some teams that maybe Georgia the one year had 2 losses. People said maybe they could sneak in. I think Texas has the best chance, but man, if things keep going the way we're going, we're going to get a 1-loss Georgia. But we're going to get a 1-loss / undefeated Georgia, Alabama there. Right. Ohio State's probably going to run the table, and Clemson looks like they're going to run the table. And I know Texas brings ratings, and Texas Alabama would bring ratings too, but those 4 also bring pretty big ratings, and they're not going to get in. A 2-loss Texas wouldn't get in over any of those teams.
Right. They're going to need Clemson to have a bad loss somewhere to a team they shouldn't lose to. Like, obviously, look, the playoff field is probably.
We'll try and help you out there on November 5th, Dan.
Right. There you go. The playoff field is probably set, if we're being honest, with the exception, with the maybe addition of the fact that maybe it might not be Georgia being the other representative from the SEC East in the playoff. I wouldn't bet. I'm still not sure I'd bet against that, but nevertheless, I think we're going to get 2 SEC teams, Ohio State and Clemson. Feels like that's what's going to be the playoff there. It was 34 to just clean up, 34-10 when Dylan Gabriel got hurt against TCU, to Phil's point.
Oh, TCU, not Kansas State.
Yeah. Both wear purple.
Purple, it's whatever. And then I don't think Quinn Ewers being healthy would have made the Texas defense play any better against Texas Tech. They probably would have won that game. Nevertheless. And Texas is going to end up going 6-6. They also, just the last thing, they probably need Oklahoma State to run the table. They need to beat Oklahoma State twice, and for Oklahoma State to go 11-2. Like, that's basically the scenario that exists. Yeah. Like, they need that to happen. Obviously, it's not going to happen. And like I said,
there is a path.
There's a path, but 6-6 is way more likely than Texas going 10-2 this year, because the rest of that conference slate is like pretty tricky after they play. Like, even Iowa State at home, I'll talk about it in a couple of days, but like Iowa State's beat them 3 years in a row. Like, they play up to Texas's level every time they play them. So who knows?
See, I kind of like the fact that Iowa State's beaten them 3 years in a row, though, because that kind of prevents this from being a look-ahead game.
Well, that's kind of the other thing that you're dealing with Steve.
Or not a look-ahead game, a flying high game.
A trap game. Like, no, a letdown game is what I think we're
letdown. That's the word.
Yeah, I mean, you have that game. You have collapses against Baylor and Oklahoma State last year. You have the Kansas game. So, like, all of your toughest games except for Kansas State, like, you might have motivation, but I don't necessarily know that college kids really think that way over the course of a long season. And also, like, you run the risk of maybe it getting in their heads of, oh, wait, we collapsed against this team last year. What if we're in the same situation. So maybe a clean slate is the best option. Like, I have no idea. It's fascinating. And it's going to be fascinating to watch, and they're going to lose to Iowa State, and then I'll be angry again. But I'm not going to get too much of it because I have to go to a 4-year-old's birthday party at noon on Saturday.
I'll watch for you.
Appreciate it. I mean, I'll watch it when I get home. The most, I would say, surprising, interesting outcome, result of the week, Alabama 24, Texas A&M 20. Man, what a weird game.
Yeah,
just a weird
game. Really only way to describe it was weird.
Who wants to go first? Because I've got thoughts, but I've been talking a lot, so I wanted to.
My thoughts are just, I think this game, is, we can probably imagine, like with Bryce Young, is not quite like this game. But it's also interesting because it's like Max Johnson got hurt, so we were back with Texas A&M's ass quarterback. So it's like it was a weird situation where Alabama's offense didn't look like Alabama. They had 3 turnovers. The game, like, both felt close and didn't feel very close. It's kind of one of those games where I feel like Alabama fans were just like clenched the whole time. Like, let's just end this game. Let's get through it because we know we're the better team. We don't really feel like we're in jeopardy to lose. And then at the end of the game, they're in jeopardy to lose. And we have to thank Jimbo Fisher for just
great play call, Jimbo.
Great.
Yeah, just running again, even if you complete that pass, he's a yard and a half short and out of bounds. It's just like you got to come up with something a little bit more creative there. You got to put your nuts on the table to try to really win that game and not do like a dumb safe option. And again, I don't know if it was on the wide receiver, don't know if it's on the quarterback, don't know if it's on the play call, probably a combination of all the above. But I think it's a situation where if you're Alabama, you better hope that Bryce Young is healthy this weekend, because if Tennessee's offense is humming and it's a shootout, it's a very different game without Bryce Young. And I think, Tennessee fans are.
I'm not sure they can win that game with Jalen Milroe playing.
I don't put anything.
They can. They're Alabama. They can do anything.
Past Alabama's Saban's defense and putting it all on the defense and trying to play run control offense and put the pressure on Tennessee, but it's just a situation where Tennessee's offense is humming right now, and they're going against an Alabama's team whose offense, for the most part, is not, right?
Yeah, I keep waiting for Alabama's playmakers to be the Alabama playmakers that we're used to, and I will give there's an asterisk next to Jahmyr Gibbs' name because he's been fantastic and he's been everything and more they could have hoped. But like, where would they be with him without him this year?
Yeah.
Like, he is their offense right now, and
even
with Bryce, I'm not
giant dominant. They don't have that giant dominant running back who's like, hey, no matter what we're gonna do, he's gonna. I mean, they have
usually they have a little thunder and lightning. They just kind of have Jahmyr Gibbs so far.
Exactly, and from a wide receiver standpoint, Matt, aren't you still like? I'm still looking like, okay, where's like Waddle? Where's Devontae Smith?
Yeah, where's Jerry Jeudy? Where are all these guys? The latest game breaker that's.
It's like, hey, they take a slant pass, and all of a sudden, like, they juke 2 guys out, and they're 74 yards to the house, and we're like, okay, this guy's faster than every single person alive on this field. In Alabama, we saw it a little bit towards not last game, the game before, with a couple big plays, but I think those are more Bryce Young creating those opportunities. And so without a quarterback necessarily creating those opportunities and a bum shoulder, now this game got a little more interesting.
Yeah, it's just weird. Bama doesn't feel like Bama this year for some reason, because their quarterback is so good and their star running back is so good, but like they're just kind of one-dimensional, and we haven't seen that from an Alabama team in a long. I don't want to call them one-dimensional because that's probably not doing them justice, but like they're one-dimensional compared to the Alabama we're used to of the last 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think the weirdest thing for me watching this game, at least in the first half, it felt like Alabama was running Bryce Young's offense with a quarterback who's not Bryce Young. Yeah. Like Jalen Milroe turned the ball over 3 times in the first half of that game, and all of those turnovers were on him. But at the same time, it was 2 fumbles and an interception in all 3 of those plays. Alabama was trying to take a shot down the field, and nobody was open. They just could not get open down the field against those guys. And then the second half, they started running some underneath stuff, some shorter stuff, some crossing patterns and all that kind of stuff. And it helped open up the offense a little bit. But I mean, 4 turnovers total because McClellan had the fumble. Will Reichert, who's like the funniest thing about Alabama forever was the fact that Alabama could have like 5-star players at literally every position and could never make a kick when they needed to. Then suddenly, like, Will Reichert has been one of the best kickers in the country for the last couple of years. He misses 2 kicks in this game, which he just hadn't done up to that point. Like, of course, Will Reichert's making every kick against Texas and then missing them against A&M. That's just our luck there. But 4 turnovers, 2 missed kicks. You win by 4. Like, You're just happy to get out of there with a win. I think they might have gambled. I think there might have been a chance Bryce Young could have played. Like, I really think
he was in warmups there. He was on the field.
Alabama was trying to get out of there with a comfortable win with Jalen Milroe, and it almost backfired. And then shout out to Terrion Arnold, the defensive back on that last play, who claims he read Jimbo Fisher's lips saying Evan, and knew that they were going to throw to Evan Stewart. And he didn't want to be the most hated man in Alabama for giving up the game-winning score, which there's a whole lot to unpack there. We don't have time to unpack now. But like, you have Evan Stewart, you have Musha Muhammad Jr., you have Devin Achane, like you have enough playmakers. The other thing that I haven't seen anybody really talk about, and I don't know if you guys watched the breakdown of Saban breaking it down after the game, last play. But A&M had scored on the same formation earlier in the game, so Saban they changed up their leverage on the receivers to reroute them basically. But my question is, if you're Jimbo Fisher, you know Nick Saban's going to call that timeout. He's got 2 of them at that point. Why aren't you sending out a dummy formation with the expectation that, and of course, if you have to run it, you have to run it. But like, why are you using the same formation twice there? Why aren't, like, you don't think that Nick Saban's not going to have a plan for that?
You come out in a different formation, it's still a look you're seeing for the first time. So I
don't understand why, like, because when you do that, then Nick Saban says, okay, well, they ran this before, and then Nick Saban's the greatest coach in the history of college football, and he's going to make a decision on that. And then suddenly, like, okay, like, he's outsmart you, and then your quarterback, who's not very good, has one option. It's a bad option, and the play doesn't work. That's what you're getting for $100 million if you're Texas A&M. Although I think if you're Texas A&M,
95.
Yeah, whatever. I'm going to round up. I will say, like, they performed. They played well in that game. A&M did, and I know we don't really want to talk about them anymore. I will say, like, Evan Stewart coming along nicely. Like, they really, at this point, there's no reason not to play the freshman quarterback unless they're going to redshirt him. But, like, some of the pieces are starting to develop. You're seeing the plan there. Maybe you get rid of Jimbo and bring in someone who can actually call plays, and you might have something to work with there if you're Texas A&M. Alabama will head to Knoxville on Saturday to take on Tennessee, who absolutely whomped the shit out of LSU 40-13. Admittedly, didn't get to see a ton of this. I saw the muffed kick, and I saw at the beginning of the game, and then I saw the absolute dime from Hendon Hooker. However, as Richard Johnson from Sports Illustrated pointed out on Twitter, there was only one real route on that play, and LSU let that guy get behind the defense. Like, what are we doing, LSU? Hard for me to sit here and say we learned a whole heck of a lot from about Tennessee in this game, because LSU was just so non-competitive. They didn't really give them a look, but at the same time, 40-13 is 40-13, and Tennessee is absolutely humming going into this game. They had 5 sacks, 10 tackles for loss. LSU did have as many explosive plays. We've kind of talked about the boom or bust nature of that Tennessee defense, but the offense is extremely efficient. And if they can get after Bryce Young or whoever's playing quarterback on Saturday, we're going to have a fun afternoon in Knoxville.
Yeah, that's what jumped out to me was, I know LSU was down some offensive linemen, but like, you come to expect Tennessee now, that at least this offense, to put up, 31, 35, 40 points a game. But the way their defense just attacked LSU, I was very impressed by, because they'd struggled against, some in the Pitt game. They weren't all that great against the backup quarterback. Anthony Richardson kind of carved them up. The way they kind of bounced back and stopped pretty much, I know Jaden Daniels and LSU had some bigger explosive plays, but that was kind of once the game was already, more out of hand. Their defense made some plays, and that's what's going to have to happen for them next week, on top of Hendon Hooker playing close to a perfect game. But I was impressed that, in what could have been a little bit of a trap spot, a tough place to go and play, one that I was also surprised that LSU's just kind of didn't show up for an 11 a.m. home game. That was very strange. But the fact that Tennessee just kind of came in there, didn't play with their food, just completely took care of business from the start. I was very impressed by that, and also hilarious that Brian Kelly went for it on 4th and 10 from his own 50 with like just enough time to let Tennessee pick up an extra field goal.
Yeah, and I think the one thing
call, Brian,
is, as you mentioned, like the aggressiveness of the defense. I think that was definitely a game plan coming in, knowing, hey, if we get into a track meet with LSU, we're going to win. But we have to see if we can really press from the defensive side of the ball, if not for anything else, to make Alabama prepare for a lot more looks. Because again, if their defense has played, I think, relatively like conservatively, and got like conservatively have given up a lot. Maybe it's just the fact that they weren't making a lot of plays, and this is the first time that plays are being made. But it's just a situation where Hooker is looking very, very good. And a part of me is hoping that a 75% Bryce Young plays in this game so that it's like a pretty even matchup. Like I think a very even matchup is like Bryce Young not at full strength, and it can really be like a relatively even shootout in that game, which would be pretty awesome. I think a full strength Bryce Young takes care of business against that defense. But like again, I don't feel like Alabama's defense. I've not been like blown away by any stretch of the matter.
I don't think they have anybody who can. I don't think their cornerbacks are great right now.
Which is
Kool-Aid
crazy.
McKinstry.
Yeah, like I wonder
where's
what
like safeties that are just like dominating.
It's really strange, just the lack of. I mean, are they young across?
Yeah,
the
they're a bit young there, and that's fine.
But Saban was also like Saban said a million times this year how much he loves this team and how much this team it's very, very strange. And I mean, it's weird to say, but like if I'm Tennessee, I think defensively my game plan is like I'm kind of loading the box and putting 7 in there and just kind of saying like, hey, your playmakers need to beat us, especially if Milrow's playing. But like, hey, you're not going to beat us on the ground. Beat us through the air and consistently do it. I don't think you can do it. I know we can do it to you, and try and get Alabama into a track meet, because if it gets into that track meet, I think Tennessee's more equipped to come away with the win.
Yeah, I need to see what Cedric Tillman's status is, how healthy he is, because he's a guy who can really change. He can change up some of the calculus for that game. The game day game, the highest rated game day broadcast of the season. I don't know if you saw that press release today. So good for them. Also, LSU Tennessee, at least on paper, was a really good game to have follow you. But nevertheless, TCU 38, Kansas 31. You got to feel for Jalen Daniels, who gets hurt. And you also have to be impressed with Lance Leipold again. Could have folded, but Jason Bean comes off the bench and got the job done as best as he could. Pretty evenly matched game. Kansas has been really good in the red zone all year. They weren't in this game. The fumble on the goal line by Daniels might have been the play that swung this game in favor of TCU, because they might have been able to just have to play catch up the rest of the game. But all I really have to say is it was a well-coached, two really good, well-coached teams. Basically came down to which team had the ball last. No shame for Kansas here to lose this game by 7 points. No shame to anybody who had on the right side of this game, if you were on the right side of this betting line, because I know there was a lot of push-pull all week. Two really quality teams, two really good offenses. I think you have to be impressed with both Sonny Dykes and Lance Leipold. And now, some reason, Kansas is getting 7 points again at Oklahoma, but we'll talk about that more on Thursday, a little bit later on in the show, too. Yeah, I mean, just a really good, competitive, fun game.
I'm so happy for Kansas, because it could have gone, and it's so weird that I'm saying this in a loss, but it was a really close, tough loss. Their starting quarterback went down kind of early, and team could have completely folded. It could have been a very good excuse for them to just lose at home by multiple scores to a team that was better than them. And they were right there the whole way, and they had a chance to beat what's a very, very good TCU offense. I thought defensively they really showed up too, and limited, that TCU attack. So good on them, and that's a team that's gonna stick around. And I mean, I think they're still gonna win a few more games, and they'll probably be up near the top of those Big 12 standings for most of the year, which is a very, very, very odd, strange thing to say and feel still, even though we're this far into the season and Kansas is good.
Yeah, what I have to just follow up there is it's very evident now that Kansas is a good football team, right?
It's more than just a nice story now.
Yeah, it's they're a good football team. I mean, with their backup quarterback playing against TCU, they lost by 7. It's that's huge. That's what good teams do, is they bring in someone who's probably not that well equipped for the moment and make a game plan to make the game as competitive as possible. So unfortunately, I did miss this game because, as you guys know, I was at the Holy Cross Crusaders game, which they won 57-0. Yep. It took me 29 minutes.
Bucknell.
Eat shit, Bucknell. So again, if the playoff committee is looking for an undefeated team right now, I mean, Holy Cross right now is just absolutely carving through the FCS. Currently have a first-round bye in bracketology.
I was going to say, correct me if I'm Patriot
League is trash.
When was has the Patriot League ever gotten a team into a bye since they've gone to the format?
I can see potentially Colgate in the mid-2000s.
Oh, that's right. Colgate had a really good team a few years ago.
Yeah, in the mid-2000s, they had a NFL caliber quarterback. Maybe Fordham potentially one of these years when they had who's their running back who's just absolutely filthy, who's on the Dolphins now. Blanking on his name, but yeah, I just wanted to highlight that Holy Cross won 57-0, and my family and I were both this game's kind of boring because Holy Cross is winning by so much. It's something that
It's good to be back on campus, Phil. Did you get some?
Awesome.
Get some people recognizing you, be like, "Hey, that's Phil."
Yeah, I had people chanting my name as I was walking into the stadium, and people were like, "Hey, is that the guy who one time had three tackles on kickoff in one game?" I was like, "God, no, that's me, guys."
Well, I mean, that's a gritty football player right there.
Yeah.
You'll love it.
Yeah.
Oh man. I'm
What
trying
we got
to
next?
see. Let's see. Oh, so in 2018, Colgate beat James Madison in the second round, which means they would have had a bye, right? They were the 8th seed in 2018.
Yeah.
So there you go. So all right. Derailing the show back to what we have. Anything else
Let's
on that
go
game?
Crusaders.
Let's go.
I got no. Who does TCU have next week? It's Oklahoma State.
It's Oklahoma State. Yeah. So
those are some pretty fun Big 12 games then again next week. This
well,
conference is just every week.
It's insane this week. I had a note that I'll get to once we get to it about the overall slate this week. Our final game to go over this week before I have some odds and ends, and I will obviously ask you guys about Notre Dame after we do this game. UCLA 42, Utah 42, Utah 32. Utah, we've talked about it in the past. Utah is just not the kind of program that can really rebound as quickly as others when they lose players to the NFL, and they just don't recruit at the high level that like a team like Oklahoma and Alabama and Texas and Ohio State and all those teams do. They lost some guys off of that defense, and the defense isn't clearly as good. And the reason I bring that up, first half of this game, Utah dropped a touchdown pass and then rising through an interception in the end zone. Later in the game, trailing 21-18, they got a third down stop but committed a roughing the passer penalty. That led to a touchdown by UCLA. They just can't survive those margins when they're not as good defensively as they were last year. They don't have a big play guy on offense. They're really efficient typically on offense. They're just not built to come from behind. And give credit to UCLA, man. That's 2 weeks in a row where that offense has just been absolutely spectacular. DTR was awesome. Charbonnet, I think it was a career high rushing for him in this game. So an awesome performance from them. And then I don't know if you guys know I don't even know what stupid Drake video it is, but the Drake meme where he waves one thing off and then points to it. I don't know if you've ever seen this meme, but like Utah USC is no longer the game of the year in the Pac-12. It is now next week when UCLA goes to Oregon. However, I will say this: UCLA, they already beat Utah. They're definitely going to beat USC and definitely lose to one of the Arizona schools because that's UCLA football.
Because that's UCLA.
I was just looking at the schedule and I'm like, man, they have versus Oregon and versus USC. Those are both winnable games. If they win those, in the playoff. And I see, it's sandwiched between Stanford, Arizona State, Arizona, and Cal to end the year.
Are they at Stanford?
They are.
I could see that one.
They're at home. They're at home against Stanford.
No, they'll win that one then.
Yeah, it's just you see all those games and like, man, there's just like 4 trappy type games of like very below average, underachieving teams this year that can have a big day. But hand up, my strategy to not believe in UCLA after I didn't believe in them last week and I doubled down, didn't believe them again. As soon as I start believing them, I might double down in my bets because as soon as I start to believe them, they're going to hurt me. So I'm glad that UCLA has a bye week this week so I don't overreact and bet hard on whatever game that they were playing because I would have done that. And then I would have my fault.
It's like, he's been there for 17 years and it only took this long, but like he's finally turned into the player that like I think Chip Kelly thought he might. When I think he started him as a true freshman. Like, man, that guy is so good. And I mean, Zach Charbonnet has been an unbelievable pickup through the transfer portal. So that offense can kind of score with anybody. And I think
not to interrupt, sorry to interrupt, but Jake Bobo, the grad transfer has been awesome at wide. Like they have a really good wide receiver too. So there's that also.
This team can pull. I mean, are they the best team in the Pac-12 right now? Do you have them better than USC?
I think Oregon's the best team in the Pac-12 right now, the way that they've been playing the last few weeks. But I mean, I think all 3 of those teams are I think those 3 teams are a tier above Utah right now, and they've all been really good.
Next week,
huh?
Utah's favored next week, right? Given 3.5 against USC.
Oh, this week. That's this week.
Sorry, that's what I meant to say.
This coming weekend, yes, Utah is favored, but that's home field. Like home field advantage. It's basically a toss up. Like maybe Utah's a little better than USC. I don't know. We'll find out on Saturday. We'll talk about that game on Thursday in greater detail. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see. I don't know if you guys remember this because I didn't remember this. Do you remember that Dylan Gabriel actually enrolled at UCLA?
Yeah.
He was going to get. He had committed and enrolled, because they thought DTR was going to go to the NFL, DTR says, I'm going to come back. And they're like, oh, okay. And Dylan Gabriel's like, well, I guess I'm going to go to Oklahoma now. But I think I would say safe to say that worked out for UCLA. And Dylan Gabriel probably would have been fine there too. But a great win for UCLA, and that Oregon game next week is going to be fantastic. I will say this about the Notre Dame game. I feel like every time I looked, it was like a 14-point game. Then suddenly it was like, oh, it looks like maybe BYU got to it within one score. Maybe I'll put that on in a little bit. And then I looked again, and Notre Dame, it just never, at least from afar, seemed like it was a game that I needed eyes on. So what was your takeaway? What happened with the Irish on Saturday?
So big step forward for the offense again this week. So, which is like unbelievable. So Drew Pine came in as like I'd say the way that Matt and I described him is like a less attractive, less athletic, less savvy Baker Mayfield. So it like kind of has like the Baker Mayfield isms, but like not the top level talent at all, but like has the mentality of that, where it's like, I'm kind of the scrappy underdog. I'm going to do whatever I can to make a play, which worked out terribly for him in the first half of his first start against Cal. Like miserable, like one of the worst quarterback performances I've ever seen to date, to the point where Matt and I were texting like, this guy is dead. Like, put in the freshman backup because it can't possibly be worse. And since that moment, it's been completing at like a 75% completion percentage with like 7 or 8 touchdowns and 1 interception on a tip ball, and just like great distribution of the football. And so for me, the offense looked really good. The defense looked solid. And as you mentioned, this game wasn't really that close. It was 25-6 at one point. Notre Dame didn't get a 4th down at the goal line. They didn't get another 4th down that they went for. They threw an interception like past the 30-yard line. So they let BYU hang in there. But at the end of the day, when it came down to it, like made a play to win the game. So Notre Dame is looking a lot better, and they're looking like a solid 8-win team, honestly. And the Marshall game, we can chalk that up similarly to the way that Texas can chalk up the loss to Alabama, because they have a different quarterback now.
Yeah, our quarterback wasn't ready.
It was just the quarterback thing. And as you know, the mighty Marshall Thundering Herd had just ripe with NFL talent over the field like Alabama does. So again, teams from the South who come in to the home field and win, you can draw. It
happens every weekend.
So I'm very excited for Notre Dame the rest of the way, because it's going to be like, hey, they're going to be big underdogs at Clemson, or at Notre Dame versus Clemson. They're going to be underdogs at USC, but they have a chance to play the spoiler in those games. And so the expectation right now is anywhere from like 7 to 10 wins, but like they're playing good football.
They're playing the type of football that we told you going into the Ohio State game that they play. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, it took them 5 halves to do it. We started seeing it in the second half of the Cal game, where the offensive line just kind of took over. The defensive line kind of took over those ball games. And since that moment, that's kind of what they've started doing. They've been able to run the ball on just about everybody. Cal has a pretty solid defense. BYU, we know how physical they are, how just physically big they are. They are.
Adult.
Notre Dame has North Carolina's defense, obviously nothing special, but their offense is, and Notre Dame's defensive line in that game played pretty well. Like, they've just started to dominate the line of scrimmage. They know what they are and they know what they aren't. And it's nice to see them playing to the level that we kind of thought they could. And that is, we have 2.5 dynamic running backs, probably was what I'll say. They could run the ball with anybody. They have the best tight end, one of the 2 best tight ends in college football. And they know it. They have come up with clever ways to get him open and keep him in the offense, so teams just can't kind of keep him away. It's also insane that he's about to break the Notre Dame all-time receptions record for a tight end as a junior. That's just kind of nuts, like early in his junior year. It's kind of insane, but they look a lot more like the team we thought they'd be, which is not a top 5 team like they were ranked number 5 to start the year, but a team that can play very, very physical football and dominate the line of scrimmage. And for as in control of that game as they were for most of it, that had some very eerie Fiesta Bowl vibes of we're dominating and then 1 or 2 things go wrong. And, the Epps touchdown, it's like they kind of seized up a little bit and allowed BYU back into that one. And then 4th and 1 up 25-20 in driving in Notre Dame's territory. Notre Dame's defensive line makes a huge stop. And then the offense goes down and comes up with a big field goal drive to make that an 8-point game instead of a 5-point game. They get the ball back. The offensive line, they run the ball and ice it away. So it seems like they're making strides as a program, and Marcus Freeman's making strides as a head coach, which is good to see. And it's all kind of building towards the next year or two when they start hopefully racking up these recruiting classes that Freeman started doing.
There you have it. There's your contractually obligated Notre Dame segment. I just couldn't let Here Come the Irish and Phil Pinesman Goff go without just being an asshole. Sorry. That's rude.
Okay.
I do have Marshall on the list of games this week, which wasn't me being an asshole. It's our first like true midweek game of the season because the UCF SMU game was moved because of the hurricane, but we actually have our first midweek game of the season. Maction doesn't start until November. We have Fun Belt Wednesday starting this week. We'll talk about that in a bit. A few other odds and ends. The curse of Scott Frost continues. 3 teams have beaten Nebraska this year: Northwestern,
Insane.
Georgia Southern, and Oklahoma. Following those 3 wins, those teams are a combined 1-11 this season. I think Georgia Southern is the only one that has.
Yeah, I think they're 1-3.
Somebody bad. They lost the battle for Georgia school supremacy with Georgia State on Saturday. On the complete flip side, because I guess it's kind of tangentially related, Brent Key at Georgia Tech, Jem Leonard at Wisconsin, Mickey Joseph at Nebraska, Sean Aguano at Arizona State, and Brian Vincent at UAB all won. It's the first time since the FBS FCS split in 1978. FBS teams with interim head coaches went 4-0 or better in a single week. Looking at you, Auburn. Hello. You might want to make a change after you get smoked by.
I don't know why they didn't. What are they waiting
Saturday?
for? Is there a buyout for a certain week?
It doesn't go down a ton, but they have the bye week, so it gives them 2 weeks to kind of figure out what they're going to do.
Plus, you know that they're already putting together
lining
lists
up to
and
do
reaching
something
out.
stupid. And those are obviously all of those were in-season firings except Brian Vincent at UAB because Bill Scott stepped down because of health issues. We talked about him a little bit on the show. Shout out to James Madison, 42-20 winners at Arkansas State. Just want to bring it up because the Dukes are ranked for the first time, and they got ranked in their first season in FBS, which is quite the achievement. And then the last thing I want to talk about before we move on, I don't want to talk about this team. I hate this team. Well, credit to the winner of this game. I don't want to talk about the loser of this game. I am so sick and fucking tired of the loser of this game. But Illinois, are they the favorites to win the West?
I'm still going with Purdue. I still think it's Purdue. But
probably. But
it's wild that it's going to come down to Purdue and Illinois.
Baby. The Fighting Illini are ranked.
They have this Minnesota matchup. It's coming up this weekend.
Yeah.
It's going to be really intriguing if Ibrahim is healthy.
Yeah.
I'm assuming he is.
The way the line has moved, and that's on the list. We'll get to that in a little bit. The way the line has moved would seem to indicate that Mo Ibrahim is going to play. Every Saturday, my timeline gets clogged with people who are watching Iowa football, and I'm so sick and fucking tired of it. Pardon my language, but I'm probably going to drop a lot of F-bombs here. This is a program that has had a good enough defense for like the last 4 or 5 years to at least go to the Rose Bowl. At least in the years Ohio State's in the playoff or someone's in the playoff, this is a team that should be in the Rose Bowl because of the quality of their defense. But Kirk Ferentz is so much more committed to the nepotism and letting Brian continue to call plays and put a bullshit offense on the field that they scored 6 points against Illinois. David Eichholt put this stat out on Twitter. Since the start of the 2017 season, Iowa is 39-3 when they score at least 21 points. They have also won 17 straight games when they score at least 21 points. It's not 28 points. It's not 30 points, which would be 2 more scores. It's 21 freaking points, and they can't even do that consistently. They're a joke. I'm sick and tired of it. I want people to stop tweeting about Iowa football on Saturdays. Go watch something else. It's not cute. It's not adorable. It's stupid. So please stop.
My anger over there. So again, let's look at a wide receiver that they had on the roster last year and Charlie Jones, who's clearly a dynamic playmaker. Last year, during the entire season, 21 catches, 320 yards, 3 touchdowns with a long of 72. So again, we had 300 yards to the long of 72. This year at Purdue, midway through the season, 50 catches, 600 yards, 7 touchdowns. It's like they clearly had some people on their team too. And it's just like Kirk Ferentz and his loser son is he ever going to, like, how does his son, like, you just got to break up with your son there. Like, it doesn't matter if Christmas is awkward. Like, just get rid of the guy. Like it's
He
so
doesn't
it's
care about winning anymore.
no.
I feel like if I was, if it was the same situation, my father was the head coach of a team and I
your
was
dad
the
would have fired
offensive
you
coordinator
long
and I sucked, like my dad might give me an extra year, but he'd probably be like, hey, like not working out, like you're gone. Like you could be on the staff.
Tim would not give you an
he
extra
would
year.
not put up with mediocrity. It's frustrating to watch Iowa because their defense is so good, and like that should be a program that's competing for a Rose Bowl spot every year. And in years past, it has been. It just seems like defensively, they're always going to be really good. They're always going to be able to compete. And offensively, they just kind of refuse to adapt. And which I don't understand how you come back this year without even checking in on the transfer portal quarterbacks, because there were a ton of them open, and that would have been a logical spot for a lot of them. They can run the ball okay. It's just I don't know. It has to be frustrating to watch. It is frustrating to watch for me sometimes as an Iowa fan. Go Hawks, because Alyssa's a big Iowa fan, so I tune in, I root for him. But like, it's a little bit like watching some of the Lovie Smith Bears for to ring a bell there for Phil. Like, you're almost more excited when the defense is on the field because they have a chance to make a play, and then the offense comes on. It's like, oh God, like, can we do anything? Can we not turn the ball over? Can we not lose field position? It's frustrating to watch because just two exact opposite stories on different sides of the ball. The defense is so good and the offense just refuses to adapt, which is frustrating.
Yeah, it just drives me up the wall, and it hasn't always been this bad on offense.
No, it really. I mean,
it's
a couple years ago.
Coincides with Brian. It's like they've had to overcompensate for Brian Ferentz being a fail son and being allowed to hold a job that he's not qualified.
4 years ago was when they were in the Big Ten championship game with Michigan State for a playoff bid.
That's 7 years ago. Yeah.
Okay.
I looked it up the other day. Yeah. So 7 years, guys. We're getting old. On a completely unrelated note, just to make me feel old, I saw today that Minnesota and Alabama agreed to a home 2032. Like, they're going to be freshmen playing in the game who were born in 2014.
Oh,
like, congratulations, guys. We're getting old. All right. Do you guys have anything else?
Your daughter's going to be 10.
Ooh, well, yeah. It's
nice.
going to be wild. You can take her. Fly out to Minnesota. Lovely in September. One of the most beautiful places, I think, in America in September. The rest of the year, sometimes the rest of the year, not so great. Do you have anything else you guys want to add before we move on to games for this week and we kind of look at some lines?
Well, let's get to them.
All right, I start this week with a note from our friend Chris Felica, the Bear at ESPN. He put this out on Twitter. Saturday is the second time in college football history there are 3 matchups of teams 5-0 or better on the same day. The other instance, October 16th, 1993, when number 1 Florida State beat 15 Virginia 40-14. Number 6 Nebraska beat unranked Kansas State. Can you imagine that now? 45-28. And then number 19 Auburn beat number 4 Florida 38-35. If you aren't following there, Penn State, Michigan, Alabama, Tennessee, Oklahoma State, TCU are your 3 5-0 or better head-to-head games. But we'll kind of go in chronological order, kind of sort of here. Starting because we just wanted to bring it up because it's our first actual midweek game of the season. Louisiana at Marshall. Open 6.5. Marshall's out to 10.5. And I'm just kind of doing some digging, waiting for the show to start. And that feels like I don't think either team has been like Marshall obviously has the win over Notre Dame, hasn't played.
Marshall's a great football team.
They're a great football team. Louisiana hasn't been very good this year. I might play a little Louisiana plus the points, even though it's on the road, just because like that seems like a lot for a game between two teams that aren't spectacular, particularly on offense.
This is Wednesday night, did you say?
This is Wednesday night football.
There's not like I did every Maction game last year just for fun, and it pretty much underdogs and overs were the prevailing thing. It just I feel like, I know this obviously isn't the MAC, but with these weeknight games and kids in weird schedules, probably look towards an over, and 10 points is probably too much.
I just don't know who's going to score. Like, these teams' offenses are so bad. But all right, moving on to
Marshall's offense was pretty physical up front. I thought they're
physical. Yeah. Well, I mean, fair enough. Moving on to Saturday, one of our undefeated games, Penn State at Michigan, opened 7 down to Michigan -6.5. I'm personally not sure I trust Michigan to beat anyone who's halfway decent by a touchdown. Although I'd feel much better about getting that 7 back if it gets back to that. You guys have any thoughts?
Yeah, like I just keep waiting for. Okay, Phil. You know what? If he wins this week, I'll be all for it. I'm still waiting for Michigan to like be the Michigan team that, everybody kept telling us they were before the season, and, that people seem to for some reason think they are this year. Like, I still haven't really been all that impressed with them. Like, they very well could have lost to a Maryland team at home. Like, they played with their food against Indiana. They almost let Iowa back into that football game after a hot start. Like, they didn't really do anything offensively. So, like, I was talking with one of my buddies who is a Michigan fan, and I think it was during the Iowa game. He's like, the bummer is I'm still not sure we know if Michigan's good yet. And I'm like, yeah, you're probably not going to find out until they play Penn State. And I think we will learn a lot about both of these teams this week. But, like, I know Michigan's winning ball games, but, like, I wasn't all that impressed with them against Indiana. They pulled away at the end, but that game was a lot closer than it should have been. Maryland very well could have won that football game. At least could have, put together more of a drive if Talia doesn't make just an awful decision on a throw late in that game. And I still have, like, J.J. McCarthy's getting off the nice starts and then kind of tapers off a little bit. So if somebody shuts down Blake Corum or can limit that running game, I still haven't been proven that J.J. McCarthy can go win that football game yet. Maybe we'll find it out this week. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I've been having the Sean Clifford thing as a bit, so I'm just going to keep riding that into this game and just.
That's fair. I respect it, Phil. I respect the hustle, and I would do the same thing if I were you.
But seriously, I really like Sean Clifford to hand the ball off to Nicholas Singleton, just some real clean handoffs. But outside
do
of
that well. I'll give him that.
I do like him to make a couple like Sean Clifford-esque plays in this game where it's like he scrambles around, turns, throws off his back foot, and someone just makes a big play. And then I text Matt, did you see that awesome Sean Clifford play? And it was just somebody else making mistakes. But this is a game where I'm really excited for. Again, another big noon Saturday with Michigan playing. It's just like I think
just turn big noon kickoff into Michigan at noon. Like, yeah,
so
I feel like that's just what it's turned into.
Again, this could be a game where Michigan comes out super hot, but like I'm just excited to see Michigan against like a really solid football team. Because I don't think Penn State is great by any means, but it's their first like good all around football team on all sides of the ball, and that'll be exciting.
Yeah, well, the Michigan's big noon Saturday streak ends next week when we get to watch Iowa football get, I think, ritually slaughtered by Ohio State, I think is the game.
Isn't Michigan State next week?
It's not the big noon Saturday game, though.
Really? That's surprising.
Yeah. I mean, I think they finally were like, we want to put Ohio State on.
Yeah, I guess
and Michigan State's terrible. Like I'm going to be opposite Michigan State on my card this week. They are awful.
Michigan State might win that Michigan game, though, because weird things happen when they go to Ann Arbor.
If they're maybe a letdown. Maybe if Michigan looks convincing and they have a letdown spot, but Kansas at Oklahoma opened 7.5, stayed 7.5. Oklahoma favored, by the way, 7.5. It's actually moved a little bit back and forth. I think that would seem to indicate, reading those tea leaves, that Dylan Gabriel is going to play, but Jalen Daniels will not. However, the way Jason Bean played against TCU on Saturday and the way that this Oklahoma defense has looked this year, I'm not even sure under those circumstances I want to lay more than a touchdown with Oklahoma against any functional team. I'm not going to bet it, but like I don't want to like lay a touchdown with Oklahoma against a functional football team until they show us like, hey, we might be improving.
Yeah, I'm staying away from this one.
If I'm taking anything, it's the Kansas money line. That's probably about it. Like Oklahoma's defense has struggled, and now they have to prepare for two different looks because they're not sure if they're getting Jalen Daniels or Jason Bean. So very weird line for me there.
Minnesota at Illinois. This opened Minnesota -1. It's out to 6.5, which we talked about it briefly. I did it as a little teaser earlier. That would seem to indicate that Mo Ibrahim is going to play on Saturday. This is a big step up for Illinois because they're now playing a team that can actually do things on offense and defense.
Yeah, I like Illinois. I think they're a fun story. I think they're a pretty solid football team, and they're only going to get better under Brett Bielema, but I think they're kind of going up against a better version of themselves this week.
Yeah, I might kind of have to ironically do this one again because I've just been ironically talking about Illinois football a lot. So it's kind of one of those bets where I'm going to look at and just be like, if I don't do this, it's probably bad karma, even though they might lose. So again, this week is going to be like, it's like which Dr. Phil is going to come out this week in terms of my bets. Like just throw like analysis out and just kind of do one of those like weird gut voodoo type weeks. I feel like I do that every once in a while. It's getting close to spooky time. I'm probably going to be watching Hocus Pocus 2 pretty soon. So, I'm just I'm feeling like you got to switch up the strategy because, the deep dive analysis, some weeks, like you think you have the perfect card and it doesn't work at all. And other weeks you're like, I'm doing this because I've been doing it as a bit. So I'm thinking about doing a Voodoo Magic week this week with some of these top games.
You have as good of a chance winning bets that way as you do deep dive analysis. And that's true for most everybody in the world.
But it might go full voodoo this week, just like find very obscure random reasons like Lee Corso on Saturday mornings type of voodoo.
I love it.
I just realized like we couldn't really move Oklahoma State TCU to a night game. Nevertheless, Alabama, Tennessee, 3:30 CBS was 16.5 over the summer. That's where people thought of these two teams. Opened 7.5 on Sunday. It has stayed there pretty consistently. I'm going to save everything I've got for this game. I'm going to do obviously some more research and whatever on Saturday or for Thursday's show. My instinct is like we should sprinkle some Tennessee money line here.
Yeah, we dove into this one earlier. I think that's kind of where I'm at. Like we don't.
This will be the week, of course. We're like, I don't know if Alabama's that good, and then Alabama's going to
get
out of them.
It's weird that we have a prove it week for Alabama in week 7, but it is kind of their prove it week.
Let's go through it. Like Utah State sucks. Like Utah State's bad. Vanderbilt's improved, but Vanderbilt's not going to contend with
Vanderbilt's bad.
Like
we can say
they should have. Like they really played poorly in a lot of phases against Texas A&M, but that was without Bryce Young. They probably should have lost to Texas if Quinn Ewers hadn't gotten hurt, and they played an Arkansas team that's awful on defense. Like they have not played a team that has had their starting quarterback for 4 quarters and has been good on both sides of the ball yet. And Tennessee might not be that good on defense. Like Texas is probably better on defense than Tennessee is, but Tennessee is better on. Like we don't know. We're into the 3rd Saturday in October, and we're still not exactly sure with Alabama.
I don't remember the last time I felt this way about Alabama. It's very strange. There's also, though, that chance that they just come out and they
elevate their level of play and they win that game. Oklahoma State, TCU. TCU opened a 1-point favorite. They are now a 3.5-point favorite at home. Again, let me double check that because that still doesn't feel right to me. But I believe that
sounds about right if they're a home favorite.
If they're a home favorite, Oklahoma State just kind of TCU's a 3.5-point favorite. Oklahoma State still just kind of surviving. They had that home game with Texas Tech. Oh, man, God, that team has just got to be the biggest pain in the ass to play against. Like Texas Tech, they're just going to go for every 4th down. They actually had the lead in that game in the 3rd quarter, and then there's something weird going on with Donovan Smith. They weren't saying like he had a shoulder injury, but he dressed out and he played one snap, but not at quarterback, and then the backup hurt his ankle really bad and couldn't walk. It was a weird situation, and Oklahoma State ended up winning by 10. This one I'm not going to take a side. I'm just hoping old-fashioned Big 12, 49-45. I don't think we'll get there, but that's what I'm hoping for.
I love points in this game. I haven't checked the over-under yet, but again, it is the type of game where it's suddenly in midway through the 3rd quarter, 35-26, and you're like, whoa, this game's awesome.
There was a game I was in this 4 or 6 years ago, something. I was in Vegas for a college football Saturday. And one of the bets I had was a first half, or was an over. It was over 71 or something like that, or maybe 60 something for Oklahoma State and Texas Tech. And the game was a touchdown away from the over by halftime. I'm really hoping for that to happen in this one. That's my analysis here. This should be a really fun game. I think maybe
both leaky defenses too. So it's it's
fun. NC State at Syracuse. Syracuse opened a 5.5-point favorite. It is down to 3.5. If you didn't see it on Saturday, NC State managed to knock off Phil's Knowles with some tough play calling at the end of that game, kind of backed into a corner with an unreliable kicker. But Devin Leary injured his shoulder, did not play in the second half. And the only thing I have to say about this, aside from the fact that Syracuse laying 3.5 points against any functional football team with a decent defense is a little concerning. We need centralized injury reporting in college football because Dave Doran said that Devin Leary's injured shoulder could be 1 week, could be 6 weeks. That's a wide distribution of time there, fella. Got to give us a little bit more than that. But if it could be 6 weeks, it probably means it's going to be closer to 4, 5, 6 weeks than 1, 2, or 3.
Yeah, I mean the line seems like it is, right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think Leary definitely doesn't play this week. There's no chance.
I think they had -5 passing yards in the second half. I think they threw one. I was listening to another podcast. I think they threw the ball behind the line of scrimmage on a screenplay, or maybe they're trying to trick play and got tackled and lost 5 yards. So an interesting one there. LSU at Florida, open Florida -3. It's now 2.5. hey, say what you will. We don't want to talk about Brian Kelly anymore, but this is always a stupid game. This has been a stupid game forever. Les Miles, stupidity, throwing cleats in the fog, stupidity. It's just one of those that you can put on Saturday night and expect really, really stupid things to happen when LSU and Florida get together.
Oh, by the way, this is we can talk about Brian Kelly all we want. I think it's fun, especially after weeks like that. So I'm not they're not in my Texas A&M category where we don't need to talk about them anymore. We can bring up LSU after losses every week. Yeah, I don't know. Florida probably has the higher ceiling in this one, but then we see what they do at Tennessee, and they almost come away with a win there, and then they struggle at home against Missouri. I have no idea what to make of either one of these teams. And put that on top of what you said about the rivalry where weird things tend to happen. This is don't go anywhere near the damn game.
Just stay far away, and also I just don't really care. I like them going to this game. I don't care what happens in this game at all. I just want chaos.
Yeah, that's the reason I put it on the list, to be frank. Clemson at
be fun.
Go ahead.
Probably rooting for Florida.
Probably, yeah.
Clemson at Florida State. Florida State, or Clemson open rather, 4.5 point favorite, down to 3.5 in favor of Clemson. Feels like maybe one of the last times we might see Clemson get pushed this year, but Florida State coming off of 2 straight losses. Clemson slugged their way to a comfortable win over Boston College. It was a little tight early, and then they pulled away in that game. 3.5 points. Dogs or Phil's boys. Phil, you got any thoughts on what to expect from your Noles this week?
I mean, I like Johnny Wilson and their offense to put up some points. This is a bad matchup for Clemson's shaky secondary, a 6'7", 230-pound wide receiver who's really motivated. So, I mean, I'm going to dig into this game a little bit more. I'm not going to go as far as say I like the Noles a lot, because I just need to dig into more, can their defense put pressure on DJ? Because if they make DJ really uncomfortable, I think this game can turn into a bit of a wonky shootout towards the end of the game. And in that case, I like Florida State to miss a kick at the end of the game to lose it. But I do see this being a very close game, especially being in Tallahassee at night, right? So it's it has a making of a pretty big time matchup. And again, I think for Florida State fans, you have to take this as a breath of fresh air, being we have a game against Clemson at home, which is going to be a big game environment, which we haven't felt like that in a while. Every game, I mean, Notre Dame to open the season last year because it was the first game of the season, but the past 4 or 5 years, when has there been a mid-season big game? That's meaningful. This is still a very meaningful game for them too. It's hey, we're competing for a mid-level top-tier bowl game and a turnaround season. So this is Florida State has every single thing to play for this week. I mean, so does Clemson being undefeated, but it's I feel there's going to be a lot of urgency, which Clemson, if they come out to a slow start, could really bite them in the ass.
I think it's one where Clemson just kind of outlasts Florida State and ends up winning late. But This is it's a tough line. It's a tough game. It's a tough environment. I don't have too much of a feel of. It's probably one I'm going to stay away from as well. But I'm very excited to watch it because college football is a better place when Florida State is competitive and good and having these big time home games.
I would love to see Dabo lose and then say that they were underdogs in this game too.
Yeah, it seems like something that Dabo would try to pull off. The next one, I have 2 more on my list. And before I wanted to mention 2 other games that I don't have lines for. Mississippi State at Kentucky, another ranked versus ranked game at the very least. Open Mississippi State 1.5. The line is out to 7, which lets you know that Mike Leach has a lucky cowbell up his ass. Didn't have to face KJ Jefferson last week for Arkansas, and it would seem that if they're now out to 7-point favorites, that Will Levis is not going to play for Kentucky on Saturday.
At Kentucky again?
At Kentucky again, man, that is a team they don't match up particularly well with Alabama, and that's going to end up screwing them. But there's some buzz that they could be a team to maybe take down Alabama. And at the very least, I will say at the very least, they're pretty to very good, and Ole Miss is pretty to very good, which means that the Egg Bowl this year, we are barreling towards an absolutely bonkers Egg Bowl.
Mississippi State's been fun to watch. I mean, they got lucky with KJ Jefferson not being healthy last week, but then they went out and just stomped them. They left no doubt. They're going to look back on that LSU loss where they kind of were the better team, but just kind of let things slip away in the second half is one they're going to kick themselves for. But I've been pretty impressed with them this year. Kentucky looked lost in that South Carolina game without Will Levis. I would probably lean towards Mississippi State because I think they're going to be able to put up points. and I'm not sure Kentucky's going to be able to put up points at all. And I know he's hurt, so maybe it's not the discussion, but like I keep seeing everywhere, like Mel Kiper's got Will Levis #1 on his big board and thinks he's going to be. Why are people obsessed with Will Levis? I just don't understand
Josh Allen
it.
arm strength one time, and it's like that's like all people talk
I
about.
do. I don't understand where the Will Levis. Like I think he's a fine quarterback. I don't understand the #1 overall top 10 pick hype. I just don't get it.
Also, I'm glad next week is at Alabama because I can't stand watching Mississippi State at home with their cowbells. My wife and I both turned to we were watching a game like 2 weeks ago. And we were like, this is our nightmare. Being here is our absolute nightmare.
Final one on the list before my other two off the board games. USC at Utah. USC was a 3-point favorite when it opened this summer. It opened this week 1.5 in favor of Utah, out to 3.5. Don't know if I really want to give off that hook. So I'd probably, if I had to right now, without really thinking a ton about it, would probably go USC and just take those points. But cauldron kind of game for USC. First time, like they did not play well at Oregon State at all. Should have lost that game. And now they got to go to a place that's just as tough, if not tougher, to play against a team that is better than Oregon State. And we'll see how angry if this Utah team plays pissed off and can just go out there and handle their business against a USC team that once again kind of was good, but not overwhelmingly great against Washington State on Saturday. Should be a fun little nightcap game there.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Phil.
The USC is kind of reminiscent of Michigan for me, where it's like
I was thinking the exact same thing. Still don't know about them yet.
Yeah, still don't.
They have a better quarterback, though.
They're like, yeah, their quarterback's good, but it's like, are they great? Like, are they a top 5 team? Like, I don't see them as that. But again, like what they can do this weekend is put that to rest and like beat a very, very good defense. So I'm excited to see USC against a very good defense, to see really what it looks like, and also with a not great but physical offense, and just see. I don't think USC wins this game if they putter their feet like they do. They have to come out and like really be clicking right away to win this game. But just like this isn't a game where they like you don't just like hang around and beat a really physical Utah team.
Yeah, Utah's going to punch them in the mouth, and like USC really hasn't been punched in the mouth all that much this year. Like the Oregon State game, they struggle with, but Oregon State still gave them the ball 4 times. It's a really, really tough test for USC. I'm not sure that hook does scare me because I think if Utah wins, I don't think it's in a blowout. But the Michigan comparison, I think, is a good one. Like, hey, if they go out and win this week and like do so decisively, I will be happy to admit that they are they're a top 10, top 7, top 5 type football team. But like they're undefeated, but I still don't know yet. They still haven't shown me enough even in these wins.
And then because we love the small schools here, obviously we have a former FCS football player, a former D3 football player, and a former bench warmer in high school. We love the small schools here at the Blogger Bowl, and we have an unbelievable, remember we said it's the second time ever 3 matchups featuring 2 teams that are 5-0 and better at the FBS level. We also have the #1 team in FCS playing the #2 team in FCS this week as North Dakota State hosts South Dakota State in the premier FCS game of the year every year during the regular season. And at the D2 level, we have the #1 team in the country facing the #2 team in the country at that level as the defending national champions Ferris State. I believe it's a road game at #2 Grand Valley State. The Bulldogs and the Lakers going head to head there. So the North Dakota State game will most assuredly be on ESPN Plus. You can watch that. That's usually like a 3:00 game in the middle of the day. I don't know if the Ferris State game will be on ESPN's platforms or not, but you can probably find that somewhere. Give the small schools some love because we love them here, and those 2 games are going to be physical. I know the North Dakota State, South Dakota State game is just going to be a fight.
That just sounds, just you saying those 2 names,
good,
I get sore.
Good color clash in that game too. Just
and we are tangentially. I mean, I've rooted for South Dakota State for a few years, stupid reasons, but like they're part of the extended BetSperts family because our director of content, Andy Molitor, he is a I would say proud Jackrabbit alumnus, but he doesn't really care. But he did go to South Dakota State.
Alumnus.
So yeah, he went to South Dakota State.
Yeah.
So there you go. Do you guys have anything else that you want to add before we wrap this show for the day and go on with our afternoons?
I don't. I can't believe we're already in week 7.
Yeah, week 7. It's basically like this is basically.
Don't say it. I'm not ready. Don't say it.
The midway point of the season.
Say it. I said don't say it.
Well, it kind of
ready. I'm not ready yet.
I'm not ready either. Stop it.
I'm not ready.
I guess the last thing we'll say is we've been kicking it around in our DM chat on Twitter. Brett McMurphy's bowl projections had Texas against Notre Dame in the Cheez-It Bowl.
Oh, that'd be great.
One of the 17 bowl games in Orlando on a Thursday. So you can root for that to happen because there might be a Blogger Bowl live show on. I'm guessing probably
that
not
would
live.
just be the show. Would be we would just be in the
stands.
live stream the first half.
We would live stream from the stands. We'd just be like the cameras behind us, like, and you could see Quinn Ewers throwing for 6 touchdowns against that booty ass Notre Dame defense.
Did I see the line was Texas be a 4-point favorite?
I think that's what
about. I actually, when I thought of that in my head, I would have thought like 5 or 6. That seems.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably about fair. So, good luck to everyone's teams. If you have a side on the Wednesday night game tomorrow night, Marshall, Louisiana, let us know. And if not, we will be back on Thursday to break down an awesome slate of games. We'll give you an under the radar game. I'm not sure if I'm going to do one of those 2 FCS or D2 games. Who knows? And we will have our full betting cards. For Matt, for Phil, I'm Dan, and we will talk to you on Thursday.